Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We're here to talk The Acolyte, the new Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars series on Disney Plus. I'm here with Hayden. Hayden, welcome.
Thank you.
You are
Thank you.
fighting summer illness. You are toughing it out to be here. It
I'm
is that
trying.
important.
I'm trying to rally. I'm a little scruffy. I'm a little sniffly. You can probably hear my
Yeah.
voice, but the Acolyte's a big deal, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I feel like this is the Star Wars thing that's been in gestation for the longest that we've been known about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's been this long tease of we're going to bring the High Republic to life on screen,
Mm-hmm.
and and so I'm a big fan of that. I love the High Republic books,
Yeah.
comics, etc. So we see now. I guess just a quick little background. The so the High Republic, like phase one, is set 232 years prior to the events of like Battle of Yavin. So like episode 4.
Okay. Yeah.
Um so in essence it's set about 200 years prior to the Phantom Menace.
Okay.
This one is set 100 years prior to the Empire Rising. So we're talking 100 years prior to episode 3 at that point. So it's
Yeah.
near the tail end of the High Republic, and it's a part of the High Republic that we're not getting in the book. So
Which is
that,
cool.
yeah, that's cool. There are some characters that fans of the books will recognize, so we'll get to
Mm.
that. But I guess we'll just jump right in and say like what we thought of this. I mean, I feel like we both had pretty high impressions of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely was looking forward to it, and I think it delivered really well on the premise and getting the story set up right, because not only do you have to introduce a whole new cast of characters, for a lot of folks you have to introduce a whole new era,
Yep.
so they had a lot of homework to do, and I think they did
Yeah.
it well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that this 2 episode premiere did a better job of getting me into the story than like Ahsoka did.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's
Yeah, I
just
think
me. So I guess, yeah, go
the
ahead.
2 episode premiere was a wise choice. I think
It was.
they complemented each other really well, especially because you and I both watched them back to back, and there are some instances where I feel like there have been times where you and I've watched stuff for review and the episodes kind of bleed together, where that's a bad thing. But I think here it really helps introduce this story in just this one moment, where I feel like we got a complete couple episodes. We know where people are at, but there's still so much mystery and so many questions that
Yeah,
I'm very eager to watch more.
absolutely. So we'll get the suspense out of the way right away.
Mm-hmm.
We felt that this was about a 7.5 out of 10 for these two combined. So we're treating these two as
Yes.
like one episode in story.
We're reviewing the premiere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The premiere. 7 or 7.5. And we could probably be talked into 8. But a couple things that I saw in the episodes that are just becoming like a really common Star Wars thing that I feel we're bordering on overuse at this point, but
Okay.
we'll get there. So anyway, yeah, and so let's talk general story first. So this opens with, in my opinion, a great sequence
Mm-hmm.
with Carrie-Anne Moss as a Jedi, which is awesome. Seeing like Trinity as a Jedi.
Yeah. And they even played off that, I feel like, as far as like her movements in
Totally.
combat, and there was some slow-mo and the lightsaber being green. Like there were a lot of Matrix Easter eggs, which I really
Yep.
appreciated.
She looked much more bought into this role than she did in Resurrections. So I'll give her
Probably
that.
paid her more, to be honest.
Maybe. So anyway, like it opens with an assassin that's coming into a bar, and that's another like Star Wars like trope at this point. That's just it's in everything. Like we have to have the cantina
Oh,
in
yeah.
absolutely everything. So we kick off, we get it out of the way right away. You get that, you can cross that off your bingo card in the first like minute.
Yeah, literally.
We're in the cantina, challenging, just walking up to a Jedi, being like, basically, hit me with your best shot, attack me with everything you got or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And we go through the whole dance of like Jedis don't do that, and then she's like, yes, you do, and they go through the whole dance, they fight all of it, and then it kicks off this whole mystery of like the Jedi trying to find out who did this, who launched this attack, and it creates this mystery where a former Padawan gets caught up and in this whole thing as a suspect,
Mm-hmm.
And the first 2 episodes are largely around, did she do it or did she not? And figuring out kind of what the path is going forward, setting up the remaining episodes. So,
Yeah.
um, without getting into spoilers, I guess, I don't know, we can go into too much more, but,
Yeah.
I
Well, I
mean,
just want
that's
to
the
talk
premise.
about the
Yeah.
setting, right? Because it's a brand new era, and I
Mhm.
think it it feels so Star Wars, but it feels so fresh to me, right? And because I think we know that all of the Star Wars that we've seen is kind of like the worst period of history for this galaxy, right? Like the very
Yeah.
dark ages, the rise of the dark side, the Empire, so everything was kind of gritty and dirty. And it was really cool seeing, especially like there were a couple familiar locations, and we see those in their peak and in their prime, and they're very clean and pristine. And the Jedi even have a very different way of carrying themselves about, as far as like the way they dress. They're much more ornate. They seem to have more color and expression and
They
choice
do.
within how they present themselves, which is just like it's very interesting to me. And I feel like this is going to be like really devastating by the end when we start to see how this era of the Jedi falls apart, and we get into when they're like very conservative and very arrogant in the prequel trilogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're spot on. So when I was watching this, I was thinking about the portrayal visually of the eras, and you're
Mhm.
right. Like the original trilogy is very like dark, grimy, dirty. I mean, it's
Mhm.
that type of thing. It's a rebel alliance, like fighting a guerrilla war, right? You're
Yeah.
not gonna have the top line of everything. The prequel trilogy to me is like very. It's just like shiny and pristine, the
Mhm.
aesthetics of it all.
Yeah.
It's very polished. Um, this one to me just screamed the word like elegant. Like the Jedi
Mhm.
are very elegant here. It's the gold in the like attire on top of the brown and the white.
Yeah, it really is. I
Um,
mean, they're doing a good job of showing you visually, like, this is the golden age of this galaxy.
yep.
This is the peak of prosperity, of peace, of wealth, of culture. And I think that all shines through in a way that, but they still do things that communicate, like, there's familiar things that make it feel like Star Wars. Even like, I love like the PowerPoint wipe transitions. We got a lot
Oh,
of those
it's the best.
callbacks,
But
and
that's like a
yeah.
George Lucas thing, right? Like
Mhm.
that we have to do. So whenever I do a Star Wars video on our YouTube channel, I do the wipe transition every
You
time.
got to, man. It's
I have to.
Yeah.
It's you just do. So yeah, I very much liked that. And also, so I'll be honest, like I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but
Mhm.
for me the Jedi are often the most boring part of Star Wars because they're very like one-dimensional in many ways in many of the
Yeah.
eras of the story. High Republic is different for me. Like High Republic's my favorite Jedi era in that Jedi here are much more vulnerable, like in terms of their approach, in terms of how they see the galaxy, how they interact with those around them, just all of it. They're much more vulnerable. They're willing to say like, I made mistakes, I did things wrong,
Yeah.
I should have looked at something different. So I really like that.
Mhm.
I also feel like there's a more of an innocence to the Jedi in terms of like they're not so self-serious all the time. And I think
Mhm.
we saw that with the Jedi that are here in these first couple episodes.
Yeah.
Um,
There's some that definitely are, but the ones who are stick out like a sore thumb. And it's weird because the stakes of this mystery are very high,
mhm,
but the dynamic is very of the characters that are involved with it so far, at least most of them, is very like it's almost kind of Scooby Doo. Like it's not that ridiculous, but they're very friendly with each other. They care about each other. Um, and there's just an understanding and kind of I think it's an eagerness to learn is what it is, right? There's still so many. I feel like the galaxy feels newer here because there's still so much to be discovered that we know is coming down the line.
mhm.
So I feel like you see them kind of just like have this respectable, controlled thirst for knowledge, and it's kind of uplifting in a weird
Yeah.
way.
No, it really is. And so I guess let's talk spoilers from here on in.
Okay.
And so we'll get into actually some of the Jedi here. So we had Master Soul right? We had Indara, who, and again, spoilers, last chance.
Mm-hmm.
So Carrie-Anne Moss's character, I'm like unhappy that she's dead in the first 10 minutes of the show.
Oh, it was less than that. I checked times. It was like 5.5
Yeah, it
or
was like
7.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, right in the cold open, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is, on the one hand, like, I agree with you that I would have loved to see more of her and more of that character. And it's Star Wars, so we will in a book or comic or animated
Sure.
show or video game somewhere down the line,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But I think it's kind of smart where it did the Scream thing. I feel like, because spoilers for that old movie. There's a
It's
there's a
exactly what I thought of too. Yep.
yeah, there's a very
Yeah.
famous actor in that movie who, before the movie came out, was very heavily marketed and being in it, and like they are the cold open kill, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I think doing that with Carrie-Anne Moss, you really feel like, oh my god, like the stakes are so high. Like any of
Yep.
these people can make it or cannot out of this story.
Oh, from a story standpoint, like totally good with it. I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
see her for longer in this, and
Fair
because
enough.
really my
Just as
my
a fan.
biggest, yeah, like my biggest, you know, thing watching her on screen is the Matrix stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So just wanted to see her in something different and see how that goes. And you're so right. Like the movement in the fight, everything like was almost callbacks to the Matrix left and right. And it was really
Yeah.
cool. The only thing they didn't do was like when the kick where it like pauses and then you spin the camera around like mid kick and all that. That would have been great, but
Yeah.
maybe a little over the top.
Oh, for sure. I think it would have been a
So
little out of place. It's
yeah,
interesting casting decision though, because if you think about it, I feel like Star Wars usually tries to go for unknowns, especially with a new story, the new era, right? And obviously,
yeah,
Star Wars is huge, so a lot of Star Wars actors end up becoming big stars in their own right.
hmm
But this one kind of took an opposite approach where I feel like they're not like super mega celebrities, but if you've been paying attention in film and TV the last couple years, like almost every actor and actress in the show is someone that I recognized from something else and was excited to be like, oh, cool, they're a part of this.
yeah.
And I think it makes you feel more connected to these characters and like, you're projecting the history you have on them as a viewer onto the character, and it helps
hmm
because these are all people who've known each other for years at the point we meet them.
Yeah, there's nobody here that's like an A-list name. Um,
Yeah,
but there's enough recognition to give it credibility. I think
absolutely.
when you're a Disney Plus show in an era that you haven't done before,
Hmm.
that helps. I think
Yeah.
so for sure. So we have Master Soul. We have Yord, who
Great name, by the way.
yeah, it is.
Still
It
not over
really,
it.
it truly is. So Yord is so yours a new Jedi Knight, like kind
Hmm.
of similar, probably Jedi Knight. I assume for about as long as Anakin was when we see him in Episode 3. You
I
know,
was thinking, yeah, maybe even less. It
maybe even a little
seems
bit less. Yep.
pretty recent. I think they said 2 years or something like that, didn't they? Did they put a time on it?
Yeah, but that's about right though, because I think Anakin would have been like 3 years.
Oh, you're
So
right, because
yeah,
he
it's
he wasn't a knight yet in 2. My bad, my
right.
bad.
Yep. Um, but anyway, like there's obviously a lot of differences in their background. Like
Hmm.
Anakin's first years as Jedi Knight are fighting a massive war, right, with a lot of hardship and all those things. So that hardens
Hmm.
you. He's also being manipulated by a Dark Lord of the Sith and all of these things along the way.
Yeah.
Yord, though, in comparison, is basically like comic relief compared to Anakin.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and Yord is like somebody who does take things seriously, but also just acts very young all the time and very unlike, I don't want to say un-Jedi like, but what we're used to from a Jedi Knight.
Yeah, and I think that's where you see the divide, right? Where it's because if you think about it, like Yord, his age demographic, his generation are the ones that are the masters by the time we get to the prequel trilogy, right? And you kind of see that where I feel like he's very he's he approaches being a Jedi very much like police work to me. And
Yeah,
sometimes like in a bad way where he's kind of aggressive, he's thinking of people as suspects or perpetrators before people, and
very
he's
suspicious. Yeah.
there's a couple shots they have of him putting his hand on the holster like he's like grabbing the lightsaber to
Mm-hmm.
try, and it's just like he's got to slow down a bit. You can tell he's very stressed out and he's taking things very seriously, and he has a very pessimistic approach to things, but he also is very by the book. And I think the dynamic of him and Soul reminds me a lot of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
in episode 1.
definitely. So one thing that Star Wars is going down the road of a little too much, the thirsty moments, and we got the Yord with the shirt off right away.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where everyone's going to think that ranks against, Adam Driver.
Ben Swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, there you go. So we made sure we got that in right away. And it's like, okay. What did you think of the other Jedi? What was their Jackie?
The young one?
Yeah, the Padawan. Yep.
Oh, I love them. I think they're great. They're a standout to me so far, and they have like the childhood whimsy of being a Jedi, right? Where it still seems like they're kind of like novel and excited to be a part of everything, and like Jackie like thanks their master. They're like, "Thank you so much for this opportunity to come along on this mission." And he's kind of like, "No shit, you're coming. You're my Padawan." Like,
right? Yeah.
But it's very cool to see a Jedi who's like just so into it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And so I think it's a good mix. The Jedi that set forth on this mission at first. So
yeah,
now we get to Osha / May, played by, is it Amandla Stenberg? And really, we're watching another show, Dark Matter, where actors have to play like multiple roles within the thing. And it just makes me think when I see this, like, it's got to be hard to step into different characters just on a dime.
Yeah. And when I realized that twist was happening, or that's where we were going, I'm into it. I was very impressed. And I think those two characters they're really interesting foils to each other. And it kind of does have that, Dark Matter is a perfect comparison, right? Because they start in the same place, but then their lives branch out to be very different. You know what I mean?
So you like the twin sister angle. So they're twin sisters. One of them went on to be a Jedi Padawan and ended up leaving the Order. The other certainly has a bone to pick with some Jedi and is currently
an
our
titular acolyte. I
Yep.
believe. Yeah.
So do you like that twin sister angle?
I do, because I think like it's it gives really big stakes for Osha and for her her former master and Soul and her new friends, right? Or I guess people who do remember her, a lot of them, right? Because she left the Order not too long ago, a couple of years. I just think it works out really well. I think it introduces an interesting dynamic, and I'm very excited to see where that goes. It's very Star Wars, right? To have everyone be related to each other, have this whole familial angle going on. But I don't know. I think they chose to introduce it that way, or at least gave us that very shortly after we met these two characters. And it was a really cool, interesting twist to me, because I didn't see it coming, right? Because the way it's cut, you see the one sister kills Carrie-Anne Moss, and then the other sister, you just see her like go about her day by day, and they call her a mechneck, which is basically just like she's doing very risky mechanic work that's not supposed to be done by people.
It's exactly what R2 was doing in the Phantom Menace, right? When how we meet R2 in the first time in terms of the chronology of Star Wars.
Right. And there's even a little Easter egg to that. They're like, that type of stuff should only be done by astromechs. And you're like, okay, maybe some legislation passed.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really torn on the twin sister thing, because I get why, from a storytelling angle, now you're going to be able to tell this story of different paths and different things. Like, you're starting from the same place and going different places, and how the choices you make and the things that you do and the choices you make now going forward will determine your path. All of that type of thing. I get that. That's a common Star Wars thing. But I felt like we did something really similar to that in Ahsoka. Right. And, Star Wars has done this stuff a lot, and I don't know,
Yeah.
the twin sister aspect just feels a little like, I don't know if lazy is the right word, but
Familiar though. It's
easy.
not.
It's just
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
So at first I was wondering if we were getting like some creepy, this is my like other personality type thing.
I thought that for a
Like,
second. Like, is
yeah,
this going to be like a Fight Club where like she's
yeah,
blacking out, and then I think that could have been a really interesting angle. I don't know how you would have made that work logistically.
yeah. The
But
way the story unfolded, there's no way.
no.
But even like after we know, and this is just a couple of the things that bugged me a little bit. So even after we know that she's not the one who did it,
Mm-hmm.
right? That Osha is not guilty. It's the sister.
Mm-hmm.
We still have another fake out after that, where it's like in the Jedi Temple on this other, I forget the name of the planet, but where the second Jedi is killed. It's
Yeah.
like for a second, it's like, oh, I know how this looks because she somehow stumbles upon the body before anybody else does,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like we all know it's not her. Like
Yeah,
you've already established that on the
we're not.
ship.
I don't think we're supposed to think it's her, but we need to understand that other people do, right? That she's
But
a
no, I mean the
prime
Jedi
suspect.
already knew though, like
Not that
because
one.
they right, not the one in the outpost, but
the,
all
the
the others were
unnamed
there.
one who doesn't matter.
So yeah,
Yeah.
right. But then we see again like what's his name? Yord ends up because he followed her because he was a little suspicious, and I get it because you just you're having some of your own get killed, right? And that puts
Yeah.
you on the defensive and all of that. So
And that doesn't really happen in this era. Like it's not like
no,
the Clone Wars, like where Jedi are casualties, right? Like we see a lot of them die in Geonosis,
well,
and
a
like
lot
that
of
doesn't really happen in this
a lot
era.
of
I don't
Jedi
believe,
die in the
right?
High Republic, but it's a different reason.
Yeah,
There's other things at play, like the evil forces, 100 years prior
denial.
before this, yeah, have like monsters that essentially suck the force out of people. It feeds on the force.
Terrifying.
So
Yeah.
literally turns Jedi to ash, right?
Mhm.
So there might be some leftover like, trauma,
Trauma.
and,
Yeah.
yeah, and pain, anger from that too. That's there. So,
Do you
there's a lot of reasons. Go ahead.
do you think that twin twist would have worked on you better if they saved it, like maybe to the end of this premiere instead of the very beginning, like and had us guessing longer, like how is this
Yeah.
happening? Because I kind of feel like the second episode was missing like a good twist or a good cliffhanger, like that. The second episode kind of just ended,
Yes.
and I was very like I shouldn't say put off, but I was caught off guard by like I was just like because I studied writing TV for school for a while, right? I usually can predict these arcs and stuff and kind of understand the
Mhm.
pace of it. And this just kind of felt like I didn't feel like there was any finale to the episode. It's just like, oh, we just chose to end in the middle of that scene. you know?
Right. Yeah. I feel like the second episode was very much about just getting the pieces onto the board so we could like,
Mm-hmm.
tell the, get the first act wrapped up because this is
Yeah.
8 episodes. So, we again don't have a long time to tell this. We're already like as we sit here now, we have seen 25% of the Acolyte.
That's crazy to think about. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But yeah. So there's not a ton of time left to tell the story, but yeah, the one other thing I want to get to just before we give like final thoughts and whatnot is so in Star Wars books in
Mm-hmm.
particular, there's been more willingness lately to talk about the fact that not everybody loves the Jedi. The Jedi aren't this like widely loved body and idea for
Mm-hmm.
everyone that for many different reasons, but I feel like the predominant one and the one that gets used all the time, and it got used here, and it made me like, I won't lie, I did roll my eyes for a second,
Okay.
is the this idea that, oh, when I was a kid, the Jedi did something and I hated them my whole life, type of angle. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where, May has her anger from.
Yeah.
Something happened when she was young, and that created this. Now, we just had a book come out, The Living Force. exactly the same angle. Like this person who hates the Jedi and leading like a crime syndicate or whatever, wannabe crime syndicate leader, is like
poser.
Yeah, essentially had something like that when they were a kid. Like their friends got taken to be in the Jedi Order and they got left alone, and and it stayed with them forever, and it just had this animosity. And there have been other stories like in High Republic Phase 2, the one of the big bads, like their whole motivation for hating the Jedi and hating the way they treat the Force is something that happened when they were a kid, and how the Jedi like they took somebody else and not them. And it's just like becoming a very overused thing in Star Wars. And it's not like bad, but for the people who consume like all of it, like me, idiots like me, like it's, it's gonna stand out as something like, oh, we're doing this again.
Right. And I mean, to play devil's advocate, I think much more people have eyes on the live action stuff than anything in the novels and stuff. So I don't think it's necessarily and I don't think it's a huge issue, because I think for most people that won't matter. And I don't think you should be like, nope, you can't have any overlap with any other story at all, right? I think a lot of it is, I think it's thematic, and I think the reason you're seeing that happen, that theme occur a lot in Star Wars lately, is because no matter like how fictional or out there a story is, right, it's always about something real. It's always about real emotions or real themes or real politics, real ideas, whatever it is, right? And I think we're living in a time where you have this kind of like mass disillusionment where people are realizing like all of these bodies that I trusted as a kid, these governmental bodies, these institutions that mattered and were supposed to lift me up and support me and protect me, just don't. And I think that's why you're seeing that story a lot. I don't think it has to do, I don't think it's because Star Wars writing is shitty. I think it's because the government's kind of shitty and politics are kind of shitty right now. And all these artists are kind of coming into a fictional world with their own views of the world and making very allegorical stories.
And again, I'm not saying it's bad or necessarily wrong. I'm just saying, like, for people that consume all of it. So again, like, I get TV, most people aren't, diving into all the books. But for people that do, it's going to seem like this is 3 times within the last like year that major arcs have begun with something just like this.
It's all within the High Republic too, which makes it feel even more.
No, the Living Force was during the prequel era, but still, like, it's all right around each other.
Was it the Living Force, the one that's like right before Phantom Menace?
Yes, it's like a year before.
But but still, like, however you want to label it, that's all pre-Phantom Menace, right? That's all
right. Yeah, and I'm saying it's in the same neighborhood in terms of timeline, right? Okay. So yeah, it's. I do, though. I will say this: I like that Star Wars is starting to explore that the Jedi Order is not perfect and infallible. I like that they're starting to explore the fact that the Jedi Order had cracks in it, had flaws that allowed the evil that was the Empire to rise.
Yeah,
and I think that's good, because I don't think we hit on that a lot early in Star Wars storytelling.
I think that's a really recent idea, and again, I think it's been informed by recent
current events.
Right? Because I think it's when we were kids, everyone thought that the Jedi were the coolest, the Jedi were the best, the Jedi could do no wrong. Every Jedi was a saint, right? Because our first perceptions of Jedi on screen, like Luke and Obi-Wan, are very much, and Yoda, are like just like the pure archetypes of good, right? And very, very noble. But we see the prequels and we see like, we see that we've known the whole time that the Jedi Order fails. So we need to show how that happens. And I think it's an interesting dynamic that it's like, we've seen now several characters that it's like, no matter how pure your intentions are, no matter how driven you are to make good in a galaxy happen, like there's red tape and there's bureaucracy and there are things that are tying your hands behind your back. And I could see that becoming something that especially Master Soul becomes frustrated with as the show goes on, because he seems to very much do things against the grain and have faith in people over, like, I think he has more faith in individual Jedi and their ability to do good as people than he does in the Jedi Order as an entity.
That's what I'm getting from him as well. very Qui-Gon like in that way.
He's super Qui-Gon, and I love it because I loved that character. So getting to see more of someone like that is that doesn't feel redundant to me because it's a dynamic we've seen so little. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely, 100%. And yeah, I'm all for more of that. So I'm all for the storyline that they're doing too. Like, you know, when I was a kid, this happened. If we tell it, if it plays out differently than how we've seen it the other times, you know.
I think it's even starting differently though, because if you think about it, the thing that the twins are both upset about is both of them thought that the Jedi Order failed to save the other one when their homeworld had that fire. And now we know that's not the case. It was just different groups of Jedi potentially went after different. One of them went for one sister, one went for the other. So,
and I do look forward to learning more about that. So last one, Vernestra Rowe is the character from the High Republic books that fans will recognize. So, played by Rebecca Henderson, she's here. Not a huge role in the first couple episodes, but you know, definitely there, and I feel like will be a big presence as we move forward. So, Vernestra's really young in the like High Republic novels, so we're seeing more like. I don't want to say like in the Jedi Prime, but you know what I mean. Like it's a Jedi and with some
more of an authority figure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. What did you think of the aesthetics of that character? Like sometimes it's really hard, and we've had this happen a lot in the last couple of years, where it's tough to translate a character that does not start from live action into live action. Do you think she worked?
Yeah, it was a little jarring at first. But I ultimately do think it worked. And the reason I think it worked is because we're so used to seeing her as like a child/teenager that now we're seeing her as an adult. So it's
not like a one-to-one direct comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
Ahsoka worked pretty well for me too, honestly. I think. So but there have been some others that are, I know, you know, there for everybody that says like they were fine with Ahsoka's portrayal, like there's going to be plenty who say they were not, right? And
of course, it's the nature of fandom, especially this one,
especially Star Wars fandom, but I think we saw that especially with the Rebels crew, right?
Yes,
with how those characters were portrayed in live action, and I think people just had an idea in their head of what that would look like, and in some cases it did, in some cases it didn't, and people let it be known either way. So,
real quick before we get out of here, I just want to highlight one more thing. The whole thing of the Jedi in the temple, who was in such a deep meditative state, seemingly for a whole 10 years, like was just floating and sitting there meditating, being one with the Force, like didn't need to eat, sleep, or any of that. He was just living and feeding off of the Force. For that person to come out of his shell by talking to May, and for him to like whatever conversation they had, like she had a poison vial and he willingly took it. I'm so intrigued to learn more about that because it's like that's the least Jedi thing I've ever seen a Jedi do. And I don't think we've ever had a Jedi, like, for lack of another term, kill themselves in Star Wars. And I have no idea how you get there.
Yeah, it makes me want to learn more about what happened, right? Because that clearly, like, this last 10 years, this Jedi, Tobin, has been just riddled with guilt. So is shut off from everybody, hasn't spoken to anyone, etc., in just this like meditative trance with essentially a force field around him that he's created. And like you said, like comes out of it just to end his life. So the guilt and the weight of that must be just crushing. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see what happened. And
I feel like we'll get more of that flashback and that context as we move on, kind of like in a Lost type of way, right? Where we're moving through the present with these characters, but learning more about their past as it's relevant to how it informs their actions and their emotions in the time in the story.
For sure. So, I think this is a good point to kind of wrap up and get out. But yeah, all in all, good premiere, I think.
For sure.
I wasn't even sure what I was expecting with this, but I think that's a good way to go in.
Yeah.
Like just nothing like set in my head. What I'm expecting is then, when it doesn't go that way, you compare it to that, and then you're
right.
mad.
They did a good job with the marketing of this show. It was more about aura than like concrete plot details. And I think the tone of what I was looking for and what I've been sold on this show is definitely living up to it so far. And obviously we know it's only going to get darker and more nefarious. And I'm very excited to see more of that Sith we saw on the Rock that we know from the teasers has like the teeth painted onto his helmet and everything. That character design is very cool. Very ripe for a Black Series figure. Just saying.
Yes. I'm sure they thought of that.
Every time they design a new character, they're like,
there's a decent chance that's where the character was invented. So
in the marketing, in the toy line.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But all right, let's get out of here.
Cool.
Yeah, it does. We'll be back next week with more Star Wars stuff. Let us know in the comments how you enjoyed the Acolyte, what you'd like to see going forward in these last 6 episodes, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out all of our brand new merch. And if you are so inclined, become a member of our channel. We'd really appreciate it, and it would help support us. So with that, thanks everybody, and we will talk to you next time.
Take care, y'all.